This is the Sports Sitdown with Mike Damergis.
Mike Damergis, along with Emory Hunt, the founder of the Football Game Plan on the Sports Sitdown. And Emory, thank you so much for joining me today. First off, how have you been during this quarantine?
You know, I've been getting a lot of reading done, a lot of planning done, making use of my time. And it is a good thing to be able to be forced to, sit down, stay still, and stay at home because otherwise, as you know, I'll be out on the road, on the move, and wouldn't have had the time to get a lot of this administrative stuff and planning stuff done that I always had on the back burner, but just couldn't find the time. Well, I had 2 months worth of time to get this thing done, and I've been doing a great job of making use of it.
Now, you're son of New Orleans. You lived through Hurricane Katrina, and I think this country has been hit by two hurricanes. First, the coronavirus, and now the racial protests and the issues going on in regards to cops and how they relate to their community. New Orleans' favorite son, Drew Brees, came out, made some statements that were offensive to the African American community. You're from New Orleans. You know New Orleans. You know Drew Brees and his participation in the community. How would you describe that?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Drew Brees' comments proved to be what a lot of people regarding this whole situation thinks or have thought. They misappropriated the initial stance that Colin Kaepernick took, which he eloquently explained every time he was asked. And, you know, I always say people love to play stupid better than they play themselves because he has explained this numerous times and it's on video. So you can just go back and refer to it. So it never was about the military. It never was about the flag. And Drew Brees made it about that, totally just purposely missed the point of the entire protest and also the entire, he didn't read the room, put it that way. And his comments reflected that. And so that to me was just, that's just one person that represented millions of other people that felt the same way and chose to purposely not pay attention to what is going on, what was said, why it was said, and the reasoning behind it.
All right, well, so let's talk frankly here. I'm considered, I guess, a white guy, right? You're considered a black guy, right? But by our racial skin colors and everything like that. What is the white community missing overall? Do you feel as a black guy that played football, grew up in New Orleans, and have a guy like Drew Brees make those statements? What's the overall white community missing here?
The whole purpose of history. I mean, it's not for me as a black person to answer that question. It's for white people to check themselves. You know, this is not a problem for black people to solve. This is a white person's problem for them to figure out, them to solve. It's not like they don't understand what the major issue is or has been since 1619. So when I find it, interesting when white people ask that question, to me, it's like, hey, you can't expect me to solve a problem that you created. You have to solve that problem. And until, white folks are having that conversation with other white folks, then the problem will be more of the same. It will still be there. It's not like this George Floyd incident is the only time this has happened. We always have hashtags. We always have this conversation. We've always seen video. You'd have thought this situation would have been done with Rodney King. I mean, how you had video of multiple cops taking turns beating this man senseless, and all guys got off. And that was in 1992. So think about the amount of people we've talked about or hashtags or videos we've seen of this incident played over and over again. So it's not like this is anything new. This is just the newest incident. And you hope with the way everyone has responded because of the pandemic, because everyone is sitting at home and they had no other reason but to watch this and view this. They couldn't get away from it because they couldn't, distract themselves with other things because they were at home during the pandemic. Hopefully what we're seeing in this country and across the world signifies a change. But I'm sorry if I'm a little pessimistic on that being the case. So, this is something that has gone on since, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? So I just think that I will take the wait and see approach, but to me, it's not a black person's problem to fix or a conversation that we have to have as, a black man and a white man, is for white people to talk to other white people and figure out what they can do to move forward and help, first of all, acknowledge what has happened in the past, and then how can they build and move forward in the future.
Just to reference too, I'm of Greek background, so my grandparents left Asia Minor. They couldn't worship their culture or their religion, and they were forced out of the country after World War II. And also make note during Martin Luther King's protests and marches, the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church did march with him. So there are white people that do relate to the cause of indignations and such like that. But we are in all this together. And if we want to make America great and make America livable, we do need to acknowledge what's going on. So obviously, we've had discussions that the police need to be retrained. If you look at how police are trained, and I refer to this as they're trained as Spartan warriors when they should be trained also in philosophy as well. So certainly a new retraining needs to go into how laws are enforced. But what about getting into the community and making significant changes within the community, within infrastructure, youth centers, hospital, and educating? To me, the biggest thing is to educate. Again, not to refer back to my grandparents, they came to this country with nothing, and they were brought up in the South Bronx, right near Yankee Stadium. And the way my father got out of the South Bronx was through education. And I think the education aspect of getting these kids when they're young and getting that infrastructure in when they're young is the most important thing. And I think professional sports teams overall has been way late to this game.
Well, what's interesting is the fact that what's the first thing that people always say we can defund in this world or in this country, this specific country? Education.
Education, so, the arts and stuff like that after school, and that's so important.
Right. They quickly defund education, but they quickly are ready to fund the military, police forces. We got money for, Tupac said it best, we got money for wars, we can't afford to, feed the people here at home. And if they just fund education in the arts and, other social, programs, it helps the overall country as a whole, because you have a smarter country, you have a more able-bodied country, you have a healthier country, and that eliminates a lot of the problems that you see for as far as the crime and stuff like that. That to me, it's all tied to health, education, and those are the two things that we always, as a country, quote unquote, can't find the money for. So again, to go back on, because here's the difference between your story and my story, and as far as what people miss. Greeks have come here, and immigrants have come here and have had their struggles and worked their way up, so to speak. But here's the thing: had you not told me you were Greek, I would have not known you were Greek. I can't hide the fact that I'm Black, and so I think that's what people miss. Because you're able to, quote unquote, look like them, they tend to, even though you may be a white guy, a Southern white guy from, that it has a French Creole background or whatever. You have a Greek guy, you have a Jewish guy, you have, a guy from Ireland. You guys can assimilate. It's you can quickly identify the Black guy, and so
it's funny you say that, because again, growing up in the Greek culture, I don't see myself, if I talk to an Irish person, I feel that their background, or an English person, is way different from the way I grew up and what my family experienced. So it's interesting how, there's obviously the color factor, you see white or black, but I don't see all whites the same. And it's interesting, you have that perspective that you think maybe that we think all the same. And I think we don't. Yeah.
Well, my thing is the fact that it's easier for someone to assume that, oh, this is a white guy like me. And therefore people over the course of time, even though a lot of people that have come from other countries have had similar stories, not the story that Black Americans have had, because we were brought here.
You were brought here on chains. Let's be honest here. So
we weren't brought here we wasn't here by choice. It wasn't a vacation, or it wasn't a work study program that we came over here. But when you look at other immigrants that have faced this, and New York City is a great example of that. The immigrants that have come here at Ellis Island, and they were treated poorly by the people that were already here, but over time they have joined forces with the oppressors to then collectively hate on the Black minority here in this country. So because they have the ability to assimilate and blend in, so to speak, because of the skin color. But like you said, yeah, I'm pretty sure Greeks can tell quickly who is Greek and who is not, but you guys can all
not just by the cooking and the desserts. So
right. But that's the thing. It's hard for because of our bronze skin. It's hard for us to not assimilate. We are easily identifiable. You see a black man coming before you see, oh, that's a Greek guy or that's a Irish guy. You see a black guy coming from a mile away.
And so let's get back to it, Drew Brees. And you lived during Hurricane Katrina, where the disparities between wealthy and poor were imminent, and black and white was imminent. Go back in that time what the black community went during Hurricane Katrina.
It's just like any underserved community, it's the haves and have-nots. If you had the means, you were able to evacuate and got out of Dodge quickly and able to rebuild quickly. If you didn't, you weren't. And so this is, it's unfortunate. Predominantly, African American communities were affected, as were, underprivileged, poor white communities, which we call down there the parish. So you're looking at, Chalmette and places like that, St. Charles Parish. Those are low-lying areas that are, basically in the swamps, and they were affected as well because they're like first-line defense. But that's a combination of both race and class, and that's class doesn't discriminate, but they kind of go hand in hand when you have systemic issues over the course of centuries that have put people in those conditions to where they're not able to make things quickly happen as those that were in affluent communities.
Well, 15 years ago, New Orleans was hit by Hurricane Katrina, and Drew Brees 4 years later helped lead that team to Super Bowl and really lifted the spirit of New Orleans. Talk about the significance of what that team meant to New Orleans, and in particular, Drew Brees.
Well, you look at the Saints, franchise history. It wasn't until Jim Mora got there in the 80s.
And ex-USFL coach, by the way, of the Philadelphia Stars, who won 2 championships.
And brought in a ton of his ex-USFL players, too. You talk about
Aging Cannon, Bobby Hebert from the Panthers. That's right.
Bobby Hebert, Sam
Mills,
Holland Johnson, those guys, Buford Jordan, those guys helped build that team, and so that was some success. And you saw the city get behind. You had the "Bless You Boys" song that came out in '87,
they're called the Dome Patrol, the linebackers.
Dome Patrol was the linebackers. In '91, you had Cha-ching, which was the slogan that was taken from a rally/checkers commercial. Seth Green was the star of that commercial, and they took the cha-ching and made that the logo, the slogan for 1991. So the Saints experienced a lot of fun and winning times from '86 to '92. Then after that, it went downhill. Moore, got fired, and so he quit, and so everything else just kind of fell down the wayside with Mike Ditka era and all that stuff. And then in comes Jim Haslett with Aaron Brooks, and they had success actually when their first playoff game in franchise history in 2000 when they beat the then reigning Super Bowl champs Los Angeles Rams, or St. Louis Rams at the time. So you had a little bit of upswing in fan morale and city morale at that time. They were behind that football team, Joe Horn, Aaron Brooks, and Deuce McAllister. And then they had bad times, and we saw that stretch out until Sean Payton got there, and then they brought in Drew Brees, and we know how that has gone for the last 15 years. This is going to be his 15th season. And so that 06 season, when you saw them go to the NFC Championship game, and Drew Brees brought some stability to the Saints offense, and along with Reggie Bush, and Deuce McAllister, and Joe Horn before they moved on to Marcus Colston and Jimmy Graham, all these stars like that. But Drew Brees was a constant in an ever-changing Saints offense. And so by him being a future Hall of Famer, easily a first ballot Hall of Famer, and by him being the constant player there, the city has, sort of treated him as a native son. If you talk to some Saints fans, like to call them these since 2006 Saints fans, they think Drew Brees went to LSU, or so they just automatically assume Brees is homegrown talent, because he just started following the Saints since they started winning. But this is a guy that has a huge presence in New Orleans because of the success he has had individually and what he has meant to the football team and their overall success as well.
All right, so he makes a statement. Basically, he's going to honor the flag, because his lineage is, served in the military. I had a great uncle that served in the Battle of the Bulge. I would always honor the flag as well. But his comments, they basically evaded the issue as we discussed earlier. Do you think his apology is enough to win back his teammates this year?
It's all about show and prove. And it's, again, you can say things because of the reaction you got, but it's all going to be about the action of what you are going to put out there moving forward. So yeah, you got backlash. You quickly say, "Oh, I'm sorry." You're going to find all the right things to say. He said all the right things, but words are empty without action. So we'll see. And the whole honor the flag thing, again, I just find it interesting that, funny sometimes that white people believe that only white people fought in wars. You have many stories upon many stories of.
Well, to give you an example, one of my classes I teach is sports history and culture class, and I point out that here's Joe Louis, the heavyweight championship of the world, lost to Max Schmeling in the first time, comes back and beats him the second time, and basically it's democracy versus Nazism, and he becomes America's hero. And then Joe Louis basically gives up his career, all the money he's making for fighting, to go, encourage troops over in World War II, going in Europe. And when he comes back to the country, and basically he's back taxes and is broke the rest of his life. An American hero, Joe Louis, is broke the rest of his life because of back IRS taxes. So, that's just another example of, a man that did so much and fought for his country. And the fighters, the Tuskegee fighters that fought during World War II, it's not acknowledged, and they couldn't get the GI Bills. So I think there's got to be a way where we could honor the flag and acknowledge the inadequacies of the countries. Not everything excused upon is white and black. There's a lot of gray areas here where, yeah, you can do great things, and this country can do great things, but there's a lot of flaws in this country.
Well, because people avoid having tough conversations. And, just in terms of not even about race right now, let's just say in terms of a relationship, right? People have problems admitting that they're wrong in a certain situation, right? Like, damn, I was wrong there. I'm sorry. People have a hard time admitting that. They would rather end the relationship and try to avoid that confrontation, that difficult conversation altogether, as opposed to just apologizing, acknowledging, and trying to make better moving forward. Again, blacks were promised 40 acres and a mule. That goes all the way back. Think about the systemic advantage one has when you own land.
It's everything in this country. It's since man time. That's why the immigrants came here, because in Ireland, the Irish were oppressed by the English, and they came here to own land. And then they came here, and they still were, under the heel of the English at the time. If you know the history and everything, the whole thing was going out to Oklahoma, going out west was to own land. So yes, owning land is everything.
Right, and so you promise a nation of freed slaves 40 acres and a mule. Okay, fine. Then you also, promise equity. And so when you have, we call it pull each other up by the bootstrap, right? But you have situations of communities doing that only to be demolished by, racist whites. You think about the Tulsa massacre, which is never taught in school. You think about what happened in Rosewood. These are thriving African-American communities. You think about Seneca Village out here in New York City. You think about all these thriving African-American communities that were destroyed by vigilante racist whites, only to have now, to restart again. So imagine every time you build, someone comes in and destroys. When all you're asking is for, you know, equality. You're not even asking for revenge. You just want to be able to do your own thing like everyone else is able to do their own thing. So, just the systemic problems that go all the way back, admitting you're wrong, um, trying to rectify the issue. Blacks are the only ones that haven't gotten reparations for anything. You go across history. Many different wrongs have been righted by reparations, except here with Black Americans. And I think that's the starting point for acknowledging and moving forward. We see this all the time when, and I hate to use this example, but it's a case of that when you have someone that's wrongly imprisoned for years, and then when they're freed, the government gives them, I want to say I forgot the rate, but they give them money for, hey, we were wrong. Here's millions of dollars because we're trying to right this situation. Even though we can't give you the years back that we stole from you, we can help make your future years better by giving you X, Y, and Z. And I think that in a small scale is reparations, or whether it's, however you want to, define what that is, whether that's access to grants, access to education, in terms of, not having, not forcing someone to have to pay tuition, whatever the case may be, there has to be an acknowledgement and reparations moving forward to help get everyone up to speed, rebuild the relationship, and get this country, back to where it says it says it is on paper, but we know living in it that is not the case.
So where do we go from here? The NFL's, looking at a lot of players over the last few years have been looking to, raise racial awareness and invest in the community. Are they, in your estimation, are they having an impact and making changes? All the efforts that are being made.
We'll see. Again, it's right now you see these long drawn out statements. That's just a bunch of words thrown together. The right words to say right now. And again, it's always about action.
I'm not talking about the league. I'm talking about the players that are, looking to change laws and are meeting with politicians.
Yeah, that's action. You've seen some people take steps, toward making changes. And again, the action is always important. It's always about action. Like the saying goes, I'm from Missouri. You got to show me, right? So the action it should be more than just photo ops. And hey, yeah, we were on this, we were on Capitol Hill doing this and, making change. Well, until you effectively see change. And again, I'm not in every community. I can only speak to the community that I am in and reside in. And so if those players that are active in their communities, which most players are making significant changes as far as like meeting with, councilmen and government mayors, governors, and all stuff like that, and getting change, then that's productive. But again, at the end of the day, they can only do so much. So we can't put all of society's changes on athletes. They can't change what has been the game plan since.
I think though athletes and entertainers have the biggest influence because especially among the young. If you remember growing up, my favorite player growing up was Reggie Jackson, and what he said to me was like gold. Or Mark Gastineau, per se, former New York Jets, and Joe Klecko. So I think athletes and entertainers have the biggest influence on the youth. So I think it's vital that so much of this push comes from them, because you really got to capture the youth and make the change at the grassroots.
Who has the biggest impact on the youth? Parents and how they teach their children, educators and how they educate the children, building on what the parents' foundation has been laid in the home. And everything else after that is icing on the cake. So if you were taught right at home and taught properly in school, what your favorite player says is just, oh, that's great. I agree.
No. Listen. As we talked earlier, I said the education is the way to go. But I think at some point when kids get to a certain age, they're out there with all the technology. They're influenced by that so much more than we were growing up. The kids at 3 years old are on the iPhones and tablets and everything like that. That I just feel that it's the fact that the players are trying to make a difference now more than ever before. I mean, Michael Jordan finally is taking a stance after being criticized for most of his career, not taking a stance and donate $100 million. I mean, this has been a long time coming for him.
Did you need Mark Gastineau to tell you to not hate your fellow man? To not hate your fellow man?
I didn't need anybody to tell me to hate or not, because I learned from my parents you treat everybody equal. However, if Mark Gastineau may have acted in a certain way on the field, or say he grew his hair long. For example, I slicked my hair back because I watched Happy Days and Arthur Fonzarelli, Henry Winkler combed his hair back. So there is an influence, and
right, there is.
Culture comes in. So
I'm not saying there is, but significant influence tends to happen. That's cosmetic influence. Like I remember watching, being the biggest Herschel Walker fan growing up, and I wanted big shoulder pads because I felt like it made me look like Herschel Walker. Or as a kid, you see Earl Campbell with those big thigh pads, so you double up on thigh pads and have big thigh pads like Earl Campbell. But fundamentally, who you are as a person, to me, doesn't come from a celebrity. It comes from your parents and your teachers and people around you in the community. If they say it takes a village, it really does. And if your village is tainted and toxic, then you're going to have essentially a toxic child going out into the world.
Well, Emory Hunt, thank you so much for this candid conversation about race relations in this country, and hopefully, down the road here, all the protests and marches for change actually take effect. So, thank you so much for joining me here on the Sports Sit Down.
Appreciate you having me. Always a pleasure.